On the first day of being in this book, I stumbled into an incredibly awkward situation. I barely dared to move as I watched a perfect man approach. I didn't even have the courage to look up, clutching my clothes tightly. From the looks of it, I didn't seem entirely unwilling, did I? Slowly, I raised my head, only to meet his cold, piercing eyes. Wow, what a handsome man. With looks like that, he must be the male lead in a novel. I searched my mind for a character that matched his appearance, but the stoic man pushed me away without a word. HMPH, so innocent now. His voice was flat, conveying 3 parts sarcasm and 7 parts indifference. I covered my face, feeling as red as a ripe shrimp. Through my fingers, I secretly observed him. In 24 years, Natalie Judith, finally reached this day. The man leaned down, making me shiver. What's wrong? Having regrets? I quickly shook my head, and with a shy smile, replied, not at all. The next day, I woke up feeling refreshed and cheerful. Not for any particular reason, but because I had learned some significant news from yesterday's events. I am his self-recommended wife. I self-recommended because I seemed to like him. Although he didn't care for me, he needed a wife, so he used me as a shield for marriage. That's enough for me. In my first half of life, I struggled just to afford a second candied hawthorn fruit. In this lifetime, I want to live for myself and make it extraordinary. What are you doing hugging the pillar? Eden Jewel looked just like a butler from a lavish soap opera. I chuckled and released my grip. This pillar looks quite affluent. What I meant was, not just the pillar, the villa itself is also quite luxurious. Eden Jewel smiled faintly. This is a natural giant stone imported from S country, crafted by a nationally renowned designer. Oh, I think I get it now. But this pillar, the designer you hired. The pillar was smooth and uncarved. Eden Jewel, trained as he was, showed no sign of disdain but simply smiled, natural and unadorned. This is how the designer chose to define the boulder. They deliberately made it simpler. As I listened, I suddenly felt a chill. From yesterday until now, I hadn't remembered which book this male lead came from, who I was. Now, I realized that this pillar was prominently described in a book. That book is titled, The Iceberg CEO and His Overly Dramatic Wife, which tells the story of a domineering CEO and a dramatic female college student. In it, there was a plot point where the mother of the female antagonist was killed when she ran into this pillar. To uncover the truth and avenge her mother, the female antagonist infiltrated a wealthy family, married the CEO, and plotted against the female lead. In the end, though, because the female antagonist was merely a supporting character, the author never revealed the truth. Furthermore, the female antagonist was divorced by the CEO 2 weeks after their marriage. Not for any particular reason, just because the CEO found his true love. Madam, breakfast is ready. Eden Jewel's smile felt insincere, and the pillar felt cold. Just thinking about how my life as a rich lady would end in 2 weeks filled me with panic. No, I must secure the CEO. At the breakfast table, the CEO remained cold, not saying a word during the meal. When he glanced at me, it was just a fleeting look of about 0.3 seconds. I obediently sat down, and just as I picked up a bite of food, I let out a yelp. Eden Jewel looked over at the CEO. He didn't speak but silently asked me what was wrong with his eyes. I rubbed my waist. Did you sleep well last night? As expected of a CEO. Hearing such a thing, he remained unfazed and composed. The well-trained Eden Jewel quietly turned his head away. I bit my lip. The CEO suddenly twitched his lips, put down his chopsticks, and asked, "What do you want?" Eden Jewel seemed to have received some sort of signal, bending over and pulling out a card from a hidden compartment in the wall. Whoa, so extravagant. I gulped looking at the card, sighing and speaking in a tone that was 7 parts playful and 3 parts regretful. I think if I could eat while sitting on Cleveland Gallup's lap, it wouldn't hurt so much. The CEO's name is Cleveland Gallup. This was the term the female lead used for him in the book. And now, I'm stepping in first to gain the upper hand. As someone who has read countless novels, how could the female lead compete with me? As I expected, my words piqued the CEO's interest. He called Eden Jewel over and placed the card in front of me. Then he stood up, gazing at me intently. I thought you were an obedient doll. Now, take your money and go. This wasn't how I envisioned it. I won't. Eden Jewel shoved the card into my hand, but I glanced at it, before slipping it into my pocket, still stubbornly insisting, I won't. The CEO didn't care. His impatience was evident, his furrowed brows signaling he was on the verge of anger. Where did things go wrong? The female lead was undoubtedly an overly dramatic character. I pouted, tears welling up, before the CEO could express his anger, and Eden Jewel could intervene. I was already sobbing uncontrollably. I'm so miserable. I choked out. To think that after a hidden marriage and being intimate, I'd be kicked out the next day. Aren't you afraid that Cleveland Gallup is, in fact, the father of my child? Cleveland Gallup froze. Eden Jewel was stunned, and even Crystal Scripps, who peeked in from the kitchen, was taken aback. Perhaps everyone believed in the CEO's abilities, so they looked at me, suspecting there might be some truth to my words. Only the CEO gazed at me, with a dark expression. I instinctively tightened my grip on what I was holding. Let go of your hand first, the CEO said coldly. How could I refuse? I wiped my tears, standing up from the ground, only to accidentally rub my runny nose on the CEO's pants. My apologies. I draped myself uninvited. While I laughed nervously, I felt a flutter of hope, thinking my subsequent life would be secure. Soon after, the CEO stepped 3 meters away from me and closed the door, his last words lingering. Arrange for Natalie Judith to move into the west suburb apartment. Eden Jewel, yes. Entering the apartment meant distancing myself from the CEO. At present, this wasn't such a bad thing, it was just the perfect time to devise a plan to win over the CEO. After all, the card he had given me was quite generous. If it actually works. At that moment, as I awkwardly stood at the payment counter with a bag of items, my confidence wavered. This card was good, but I didn't know the password. Miss, your total is 105,000 yuan. I knew that all too well. Just as I was about to despair, a cheerful laughter rang out from behind me. Ha ha ha, isn't this Natalie Judith? Turning around, I saw Omar Ulysses, the CEO's rival from the neighboring company, looking at me with a mocking grin, as if I were a fool. Now that I was the CEO's nominal wife, surely he had caught wind of some rumors. In the novel, to irritate the CEO, Omar Ulysses even deliberately flirted with the female antagonist. Of course, once the female lead appeared, the female antagonist, who was me, quickly turned into a neglected side character. Seeing the second male lead, I felt elated. In front of the cashier, I hurried over to him, unabashedly grabbing his arm. Ahem, I quietly said, will you help me pay this? I'll sell you a secret. Omar Ulysses raised an eyebrow. Oh, he responded. About the new project's documents. I looked into his charming eyes with determination. I have a copy. Stolen. It's a joke, I'm the reader here. How could I not know what Omar Ulysses is thinking? This new project is a hot commodity that both the big boss company and his are vying for. His eyes lit up for a moment, but then he leaned in a bit closer, fixing his gaze on mine and said, why should I trust you? I shook my head, raising a finger. If you don't trust me, then there's no one else in this world you can trust. Omar Ulysses is the complete opposite of the big boss. While the big boss never smiles, Omar Ulysses is always radiantly cheerful. Let's hear it, he said. I turned to see the cashier looking a bit anxious. Quickly, I said, business also involves human nature. I know what you want, and you know what I want, it's a fair trade. I know you're invested in this new project, which is my leverage. Right now, you have a chance to gain an advantage over me, and there's just one word to do that. I rubbed my fingers together, squinting. Money. Omar Ulysses nodded, sizing me up for a moment before bursting into laughter. Cleveland Gallup, being with you truly is a joke. Who's the joke? Omar Ulysses tugged me out of the mall, wrapping an arm around my neck, and whispered in my ear, of course, it's him. The big boss looked grim. This scene played out in the novel before, Omar Ulysses trying to provoke Natalie Judith to irritate the big boss, who then proceeded to beat up Omar Ulysses, leading him to develop a deep contempt for the female character. It was indeed a moment where my life hung by a thread. No man can tolerate seeing his wife being cozy with another man, let alone one like the big boss. Even though I had a verbal agreement with Omar Ulysses, my fate still rested in Cleveland Gallup's hands. At that moment, If I didn't make some kind of statement, it would only increase his disdain for me. What should I do? Under Omar Elias's provocative gaze, and the big boss' scrutinizing expression, I couldn't break free from Omar Elias's arm, and had no choice but to act first, reaching for Omar Elias's hand. He paused for a moment but didn't let go, allowing my hand to move until I grasped his wrist. At that moment, the big boss could no longer tolerate our intimate contact and began to approach us. I suddenly exerted myself, yanking on Omar Elias's arm to deliver a highly skilled shoulder throw. Hey ha! In that instant, the entire mall fell silent. Looking at Omar Ulysses on the floor, I tossed my hair. Joke's on you. I'm a black belt in Taekwondo. Seeing the big boss halted footsteps, I pouted and scampered over. Cleveland Gallup, are you here to see me? This man just tried to kidnap me to swindle your money. How awesome am I? The big boss, Omar Ulysses. Though the process was somewhat violent and showed my not so feminine side, the big boss seemed satisfied with the outcome. He tossed me a handkerchief and told me to clean myself up. So, I did, rubbing until my whole hand turned red, presenting it to the big boss like a child seeking praise. Cleveland Gallup squinted at my obedient behavior, obviously pleased. Even Eden Jewel, who stood behind him, couldn't help but glance at me, nearly praising me as a capable and resilient woman. President, we're going to be late for the meeting, Eden Jewel reminded him at just the right moment. Cleveland Gallup glanced at the now fuming Omar Ulysses, sneering as he walked toward the elevator. Hey! The person ahead didn't wait for me to shout and said, follow me. All right, Eden Jewel's gaze said it all. My status had definitely soared after this incident. I trailed behind the big boss like a little subordinate, proudly carrying my shopping spoils. However, just as the elevator doors opened, my rival appeared completely unguarded. A stunning girl was also carrying many shopping bags, and was about to exit the elevator. The big boss' unyielding gaze fell gently on the girl, and she brushed past us. I caught a whiff of her lotus fragrance, a declaration of war. It had to be the drama queen female lead. In the novel, the drama queen female lead was always stirring things up, enticing the male lead, and I couldn't fathom why the big boss was so smitten with the troublesome female lead. If I guessed correctly, as the female lead stepped out of the elevator, her foot somehow tripped on the smooth ground, and she let out a slight "ouch" as her body tilted. Not good. I had to be prepared. Before anyone could react, I dashed to stand in front of the big boss with lightning speed. The female lead predictably fell right onto me. We locked eyes, me underneath her, and she looked down at my face, seemingly disdainful. Sorry, I couldn't hold everything. I had too much stuff. The female lead stood up and apologized to us, mainly to the big boss. To my surprise, he responded to her, nodding without averting his gaze, pulling me up from the ground. I'd intended to play weak, but he was too strong. I had no chance to struggle. The female lead turned and left, and the big boss led me into the elevator. The first thing he said was, Eden Jewel, find out who that girl is. Shay. I still didn't stop her. In 2 weeks. Was it really time for the female antagonist's downfall? I remembered in the novel that 2 weeks later, the male lead was invited to S University's anniversary as a guest, where he would reunite with the female lead, and I would be tossed aside. Not only that, but I would also almost completely vanish from the story thereafter. Perhaps the male lead secretly did me in. The more I thought about it, the more upset I became, silently shedding tears while holding my shopping bags. This sorrowful emotion seemed contagious, making it hard for the big boss to ignore. Mid-conversation with the mall's owner, he abruptly turned to look at me in the corner, his piercing gaze sending chills down my spine, causing my tears to flow uncontrollably without making a sound. Mourning my impending tragic fate, the big boss, Eden Jewel signaled to the owner to pause the conversation. After all, the big boss was their primary client, and the owner had no objections. The big boss coldly asked, "What are you crying about?" I could hardly tell the truth, so I pouted. With tear-filled eyes, I twisted my ankle while trying to save you. As soon as those words came out, Eden Jewel's eyes widened a bit, her expression revealing disbelief. Who would be so shameless to call that saving? The owner couldn't hold back. Perhaps he couldn't fathom what saving the president actually entailed, asking, "Who is this?" It was clear he had been curious for a while. After all, Why would a woman with shopping bags intervene in such an important meeting? The big boss frowned, hesitated, and finally said, "My wife." The owner was taken aback, then seemingly enlightened. She's Cleveland Gallup's wife. No wonder she has such good taste. Cleveland Gallup must really cherish his wife. The big boss beckoned me over. I wiped my tears and approached, unceremoniously sitting on his lap. This time, the big boss didn't push me away, wrapping an arm around me, slipping off my shoes, and massaging my unbruised ankle. "Does it still hurt?" Whoa. With that expression, I felt like it should be reworded to something more fitting, like "get lost." I lazily sank onto his chest, lightly punching him. "Annoying. Once you massage it, it doesn't hurt anymore." The big boss paused in his actions. The owner looked a bit nauseated watching us. The collaboration was quite pleasant. The owner was fond of his own wife. Because of the big boss' attitude toward me, the owner not only trusted him greatly, but also offered significant concessions. This cooperation isn't just with the Gallup family. It's even more about working with you. Cleveland Gallup is such a devoted husband. We believe that a husband so perfect will also be a good business partner. I realized that the big boss' earlier affectionate demeanor was all for show. But did it matter? Before the owner departed, I let my fingers twine around the big boss' tie, and asked the question I wouldn't have a chance to ask later. "Darling, what's the password for that card you gave me?" The owner grinned, watching us. The big boss smirked and replied without hesitation, "Your birthday." The owner nodded, satisfied, while I thought, I'd be a fool to believe that. Unwilling to relent, I gritted my teeth and asked, "But the birthday I entered was wrong. Did you perhaps remember it incorrectly?" "Darling." The big boss pressed his lips together, with a gaze that felt like a warning light, sending chills through me. The owner looked puzzled as the big boss responded, "It's your lunar birthday." Such a liar. I took a deep breath, and as the domineering CEO pulled me close, I nestled into his arms. He leaned in, his breath brushing against my ear, indifferent as he said, "Natalie Judith, if you keep causing trouble, you know the consequences." He was so intimidating, and I felt scared. I conceded, standing on my toes to plant a firm kiss on his cheek. "Got it, thank you, hubby." The CEO merely looked at me, speechless. The little apartment in the west suburbs was quite nice, simple, stylish decor, definitely better than staring at that pole where someone had been killed. He didn't utter a word, no matter how much I tried to act cute or throw a tantrum. He just quietly flipped through his magazine. Eventually, Eden Jewel dropped me off at the apartment door. With a cheerful smile, he said, "It's a first for a CEO to indulge a girl like this. Natalie Judith, you might just end up being the lady of the house after all." I replied, "You don't get it. It's not me." Eden looked puzzled, clearly already connecting the dots to Kay Bradley. "Looks like his research was pretty good." "Natalie Judith, why do you say that?" I clutched my chest, sighing sadly, "Because I'm a deity." Eden seemed to walk away in a hurry, and the phrase, "aging like fine wine," really suited him. With a little over a week left, it was clear the CEO wouldn't fall for my charms. If I really ended up pregnant, I could be in for a C-section, and risk my life on the operating table. "Have you come up with a plan yet?" I jolted out of my thoughts. In front of me stood a woman in her 50s with piercing eyes, her forehead wrapped in thick bandages, looking at me almost challengingly. What the hell? When I regained consciousness, the woman had changed from her earlier appearance. She nervously helped me sit up, saying, "Natalie Judith, what's wrong? You scared me to death." I wobbled, still confused, and asked, "Who are you?" I pointed at the bandages. "You're not my deceased mother, are you?" She glanced at the bandages, feeling guilty, then looked at me strangely. "You really don't remember who I am?" Then she answered her own question, patting her head. "It's probably my fault. I do resemble your mom a bit. I'm your aunt, Natalie Judith. I heard you were transferred to the outskirts, so I applied to be your caretaker. Don't blame me for the way I dressed earlier. I was just trying to motivate you. Natalie Judith, you haven't forgotten to investigate the truth about your mother's death, right?" "Sorry, I actually did forget. She wasn't really my mom anyway. I just wanted to secure my own wealth and prosperity." The novel never mentioned Natalie Judith had an aunt. Looks like my role as the supporting character isn't that significant. I slowly lifted my head. I haven't forgotten. I'll make those who harmed my mother pay in blood. My aunt looked relieved and sighed, pouring me a glass of water. What do we do now? I gazed at her in distress, and she fell silent in thought. This was good. Every cloud had a silver lining. Even though we had different goals, having another ally meant more power. We both wanted to get close to the CEO. Right. My aunt paced around the room, and after a while, she smiled. Natalie Judith, do you know about the Golden Ocean? Oh, I knew, too well. The CEO was no good guy. One of the places he frequented was the Golden Ocean. Plus, the female lead served drinks there, which wasn't mentioned earlier, but it was crucial for their relationship later. If the female lead could meet the CEO at the Golden Ocean, then surely I could too. My aunt and I exchanged a look, instantly making up our minds to set off. With my looks, becoming a star attraction at the Golden Ocean should be a piece of cake. At that moment, in the opulent palace-like building, I faced the manager. After glancing through my resume, he lazily scanned my entire body. Graduated from Z University. Fluent in English. I nodded, and he scoffed. Just one language. Is one language not enough? A light bulb went off in my head. 2 languages, Chinese and English. The manager seemed satisfied and agreed to my application. I came out wearing my work uniform, and my aunt stepped forward to greet me, but I waved her off, signaling that I was ready to begin work. The workplace was right at the Golden Ocean entrance. My job description, just stand still. Although it was a bit different from being a star attraction, I was still part of the inner circle. Right. My aunt sighed. You're on the outside. All right, on the outside. A little chilly too, but from out here, I can spot anyone going in first. My aunt's eyes lit up, and we instantly agreed. This job was perfect. For 4 straight days, I didn't catch a glimpse of the CEO. There was someone I recognized, though, Omar Ulysses. When he saw me, he looked surprised at first, but quickly accepted it, bursting into laughter. Natalie Judith, have you left the CEO's wife role? Do you even know what goes on at the Golden Ocean? I rolled my eyes at him. Drinking, partying, hanging out. He snorted and leaned on the entrance, chatting casually with me. That's just surface level stuff. The real deal has nothing to do with that. 95% of the people here are businessmen. They're just using this place to make deals. It's easier to talk business here, as if I didn't already know that. I just didn't feel like explaining it to him. I waved him off, urging him to leave. Omar Ulysses grinned. Does the CEO know you're working as security here? Heh, security. The title isn't important. What matters is, are you in need of money? Mentioning money struck a nerve, and I couldn't ignore him any longer. Why? If I'm short, will you bail me out? Omar Ulysses looked at me contemplatively and replied, the CEO's wife is out front while he's living it up inside. Don't you want to go in and take a look? Natalie Judith. The CEO was inside. But wait, why hadn't I seen anyone going in? I frantically searched for plots related to the Golden Ocean, mostly scenes with the main couple. Omar Ulysses seemed to understand something and laughed. No way. Did you really not know there are 2 entrances here? Now I not only knew there were 2 entrances, but I also recalled something very important. The female lead was inside, working. Earlier, she'd already met the CEO. If she seized this opportunity to go in, I could end up being the one discarded. The more I thought about it, the more terrified I became. No, I couldn't wait idly. As a staff member, getting inside shouldn't be hard. The big issue was how to find the CEO. Are you just bored or something? Omar Ulysses was also lurking at the corner of the VIP room, eyeing the festivities inside. I can't miss the excitement with Cleveland Gallup. I turned my head, deciding to ignore him for now. If my memory served me right, Cleveland Gallup, being the major shareholder of Golden Ocean, would be in the highest VIP room, and the female lead, by chance. She was selected to serve drinks by the boss across the room. For instance, I spotted 4 graceful women gliding by, each holding a bottle of 82 Lafite, and the one at the end, with an outstanding aura and stunning beauty, Wasn't that the female lead? She clearly hadn't recognized me, but I felt an undeniable pull. If I didn't intervene now, there would be catastrophic consequences. Without hesitation, I straightened up and followed closely behind the female lead. Omar Ulysses didn't react quickly enough, and ended up grabbing onto my clothes in a panic. We turned, stood straight, and as I entered the room, I was relieved to find there wasn't the ruckus I had imagined, just a soft rustling of contracts. The handsome man in the center was clearly Cleveland Gallup. Whoa, human beauty really is defined by comparison. My husband is so handsome. Cleveland Gallup. For us businessmen, pouring drinks is quite an art. These are our rare beauties from the Golden Ocean. The manager's eyes paused on my security outfit, and then he frowned, continuing, for Cleveland Gallup to choose from. Cleveland Gallup didn't even look up. He was seriously focused on the contract, simply saying, whichever. The cold indifference clearly stumped the manager. He looked us over 3 times, and I noticed he skipped me twice. I glanced at the female lead. Her cleavage was prominent, her swan neck held high, her gaze filled with fragility. She was undoubtedly the best choice for serving drinks. Ultimately, the manager settled on the female lead, smiling as he beckoned. You come here. The female lead flashed a victorious smile, stepping forward in her high heels to pour the drink. As for the CEO, he seemed inclined to put down the contract. No, 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 this wouldn't do. This wasn't a path to serve drinks. This was my pathway to wealth. I wiggled my waist and stepped forward, putting myself right in front of the female lead, flashing a coy smile. Whoa, the boss has great taste. This took not only the female lead by surprise but also left the manager bewildered as he stared at me. Seizing the moment of their dazed confusion, I swiftly snatched a bottle and hurried 2 steps to the CEO's side. In a voice that dripped with allure, I said, Mr. CEO, I've been selected to pour drinks for you. Cleveland Gallup's head was lowered, concealing his expression, but his hand stopped moving. The moment he paused, everyone fell silent, not daring to speak or move. Only I, unabashed and brazen, sat beside him, my leg brushing against his thigh, whispering softly in his ear, Are you thirsty? Just a joke, of course. Learn from the female lead. That part in the novel was written just like this. The female lead was being quite assertive, igniting desire with bold moves. What was the domineering CEO's response? He seemed to have tilted the female lead's chin back and had given her a passionate French kiss. Now that's the right way to quench thirst. I blinked, watching the CEO slowly raise his head. He looked at me, but had no reaction. Then, his gaze flicked to my lips. Oh well, a French kiss. I was looking forward to it. Natalie Judith. Under my expectant gaze, the CEO directly called my name. Then his expression softened slightly, and he leaned back casually, coolly saying, Pour the wine. Is it really fair that different people get such different treatment for the same actions? The boss finally snapped back to reality, urging the other women to step aside with a smile. So it turns out Cleveland Gallup knows our girl here. No wonder she's so bold. But our staff is generally well trained and very professional. Usually, they wouldn't act so out of line. Come on, why don't you show Cleveland Gallup how to pour wine? I looked at the wine bottle in my hand. I can't open it. The boss went suddenly silent again. His expression was quite grim as he looked at me. I thought for a moment, realizing I had to keep this job. Then came up with a lightbulb idea. But I have another special skill. The boss sighed in relief, and Cleveland Gallup looked at me, seemingly curious. I waved my hand, feeling a bit shy. Do you all want to see me smash a bottle on my chest? The female lead was furious. She was not at all happy about having to step aside. Before I could start my performance, the female lead raised her hand high and shouted, I can do it too. The boss nearly fainted. And Cleveland Gallup, strangely enough, smirked at her declaration. Originally, the CEO's expression had been one of disapproval at my suggestion to smash a bottle. Now he seemed intrigued. He gestured for me to hand the bottle to the female lead so she could perform. The female lead was speechless. Seizing the chance, I became the CEO's accessory, wrapping my arm around his and resting my head on his shoulder. As I watched the female lead close her eyes and prepare to smash the bottle against her chest, I rolled over into the CEO's embrace, perched myself on his lap, and conveniently blocked her view, my eyes meeting his. I'm really scared. The female lead was speechless. Cleveland Gallup, Kay Bradley is pouring the next drink for you. Infuriated, the female lead stormed over, pushing me hard on the shoulder, making Cleveland Gallup's handsome face visible. The drink was held right in front of him. I watched in dismay, feeling my heart ache. After all that, the male and female leads finally locked eyes. I could see the storm raging in the calm depths of the CEO's eyes while Kay Bradley bit her lip prettily. And I, having been shoved off the sofa by Kay Bradley, found no one to help me get back up. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang in my ear. Do you think Cleveland Gallup drinks? Distracted by Cleveland Gallup, I hadn't noticed someone squatting beside the sofa. VIP client Omar Ulysses made quite an entrance without anyone noticing. I couldn't help rolling my eyes. Of course he drinks. He's with Kay Bradley. Omar Ulysses seemed unimpressed by Kay Bradley's worth, only saying, she's quite pretty. Well, of course, I thought about how, in the original story, Omar Ulysses later became one of Kay Bradley's admirers. Love often starts with looks. After a moment of contemplation, the CEO took the glass from Kay Bradley, and took a sip. I couldn't stop. What was happening? All I could do was silently shed tears. Omar Ulysses patted my shoulder. I don't know what you're crying about, but it's actually kind of amusing. The CEO drank the wine, and Kay Bradley smiled. However, the next moment, he splashed the entire glass of wine onto the floor, casually fiddling with the glass, letting out a cold hum. Kay Bradley asked, Cleveland Gallup, you don't like this wine? The CEO lifted his gaze slightly. In the Golden Ocean, the culture of pouring wine is based on people complimenting the wine. The boss quickly stepped up, smiling. Yes, yes, the beauty holding the wine makes it even more fragrant. The CEO's tone was steady. The value of wine is enhanced by the person holding it. It's a pity that the people are too mixed, and the wine becomes muddled. I couldn't help but applaud. That's the CEO for you. He rarely spoke, but when he did, it was impossible to catch his meaning. The female lead clearly had a higher status than I did, but for some reason, her face looked slightly pale. Does Cleveland Gallup have a preference for which person handles the wine? I sighed. What more could I say? It must be me. Omar Ulysses continued to pat my shoulder. Don't be so self-aware. What surprised us all was that, in the next moment, the CEO suddenly turned icy. His expression didn't change, but the glass in his hand flew forward. With a loud crash, it hit the female lead on her shoulder. I covered the shoulder that Kay Bradley had just shoved me on, feeling nervous. If that had been my act, it would have been me getting hit. It seemed the CEO didn't appreciate such lowbrow entertainment. Omar Ulysses, however, clicked his tongue and shot me a knowing glance. Let me take back what I said earlier. The CEO was furious. I didn't know who he was directing it at, but the atmosphere got tense, and the bosses hurried to console him. Omar Ulysses and I quietly slipped away along the wall. Just as we stepped outside, we ran into the female lead. She was hurt, and I felt bad, saying, why bother? I'm just using a family secret. Why fight over it? The female lead stepped aside, and I felt relieved. Though I didn't know the CEO's feelings for the female lead now, it was evident they hadn't reached the stage of love yet. I returned to my position by the door, standing in the cold wind while the chief scolded me for an hour. Omar Ulysses stayed by, watching the whole time. He was laughing the entire hour. Natalie Judith, I'm really looking forward to the day Cleveland Gallup falls in love with you. The chief left, and I felt utterly drained. They deducted $500 from my pay. Omar Ulysses offered no comforting words but added, if Cleveland Gallup could fall in love with you, the Gallup family would be finished. I forced a smile. Whether the Gallup family finishes depends on you, not me. My gaze was unwavering as I looked at him. At my words, Omar Ulysses seemed to ponder. Although you made me embarrass myself last time, given that agreement you mentioned, I won't hold it against you. What agreement? That wasn't something I stated. It came from someone else. I felt caught off guard under his gaze. What agreement? I don't know. I raised my hands in surrender, trying to look as pitiful as possible. Omar Ulysses loved to stir the pot. What Natalie Judith promised me. Why should I tell you? Cleveland Gallup emerged with someone following him, clearly having just finished a discussion. Eden Jewel smartly asked those people to leave first, leaving just the CEO and me staring each other down while Omar Ulysses added fuel to the fire. I promised Natalie Judith $1 million. As her husband, can you bring more than that? Bullshit, $1 million. I noted that down. Omar Ulysses grinned, unaware that my exchange with him was glaringly noticeable to Cleveland Gallup. He was furious, enraged. The CEO dragged me toward the car. I looked up, chest out, watching for a chance. Cleveland Gallup, are you angry? What does this mean? The CEO's temper wouldn't be easily calmed, his teeth gritting. Natalie Judith. I blinked. Why are you running? Did I tell you to go? Seems like putting you in the apartment and bringing your aunt over for company still isn't enough to keep you in line. He even knew that was my aunt. So, he knew that the one who crashed into the pillar was my mother. I followed up. Why did my mom crash and die at your place? The CEO didn't answer, instead tearing open my clothing and burying his head in my neck. He sucked on my skin, leaving bite marks on my collarbone. The air grew hot as I looked into his eyes, which usually held a cold demeanor, now softened by a misty warmth. This was how it should be. It made him even more handsome. I leaned in and bit his lip. He held the back of my head, our legs intertwined, tongues meeting as if the iceberg melted in the sea of desire. Today why are you not? The CEO's breaths were heavy, not responding. Something felt off until the sky brightened. He finally seemed to wake up a bit, saying, there was something in the wine. Then, looking at my bewildered face, he said, you're in good shape. Yesterday had been so intense. It's not easy to hold on until now. I blushed and pecked him on the lips. Because of love, I'm full of energy. The CEO seemed lost for words again. Before I finished speaking, I suddenly felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The CEO looked at me, bewildered, and I was just as confused. What's going on? Could it be that I just disgusted myself with my own words? How am I supposed to keep this up? I watched as the CEO frowned, lost in thought. In a moment of desperation, I pressed my finger against his lips. Hubby, after a whole night, one can get woozy too. CEO. Postpartum care for SOS *. 3-year-olds learning to speak *. Prenatal music *. Looking at the notifications on my phone, I felt an ominous premonition. Crystal Scripts had been preparing meals that were sometimes too sour and sometimes too spicy, while Eden Jewel occasionally drew blood for health checks on me. And I had been staying in the villa these past few days, not returning to that small apartment. The CEO hadn't blamed me for causing a ruckus at the Golden Ocean. Yet, it was undeniable when I had to wear a sexy uniform to work. Eden Jewel insisted on pulling me back without a word. All of this might indicate one thing. The CEO. He is starting to care about me. He had Crystal Scripts test my taste preferences, showing concern for my health. His possessiveness in love didn't want others to see my sexy appearance. TSK. The female lead method really works. Being a little brat is indeed his favorite. I looked down at the cheerful scene below, preparing to go give the CEO a deep kiss. With his head lowered, it seemed he didn't have eyes on his head, but confidently called my name, Natalie Judith. It's time to eat. For a moment, I felt like I was his wife, and he was a competent husband. Unfortunately, I'm just a capable person from a novel, and he's an ice-cold CEO, who dotes on his wife in the story. The wife isn't me. I quietly approached him, finding him engrossed in newspapers from a few days ago. The headline was indeed eye-catching. * Ulysses' young master thrown over shoulder. Cleveland Gallup passively observes *. Since we were married in secret, apart from very internal people like Omar Ulysses, others weren't aware. My face was blurred out. I didn't know if it was the CEO's doing. It seems the CEO particularly enjoys seeing Omar Ulysses in embarrassing situations. I can't shake the feeling that there's some intense chemistry between those two. At the dining table, the CEO surprisingly spoke to me. Are you feeling unwell? I shook my head, unsure of where to start. The CEO fell silent. Logically, shouldn't he be asking me about my dealings with Omar Ulysses, or why I was at the Golden Ocean? Since he didn't ask, I did. Why don't you ask me why I was at the Golden Ocean? The CEO's gaze remained steady. Whatever you do is not surprising. Then me and Omar Ulysses. The CEO smiled, a mocking smile. Your leverage. Does it concern me? I got it, meaning that if I used the CEO as leverage, he wouldn't worry because he didn't care about me, and had nothing to lose. All right then. Crystal Scripps brought in a huge feast, and she frequently smiled at my belly. Today's menu included chopped pepper fish head, and chicken stewed with green plums. I reached for the left side with my chopsticks. I understood. Before putting down my chopsticks, I took a deep breath and asked seriously, am I pregnant? The CEO put down the newspaper, straight to the point, just like that. Eden Jewel leaned in with a cheerful smile. Yes, congratulations, madam, you're already 6 weeks along. Wait. This wasn't written in the novel. It didn't say the female antagonist would have the male lead's child. Either I had changed the course of history, or I and my child were. For now, I believed in the latter more. I felt icy all over, possibly because of psychological reasons. I could vaguely feel a weak heartbeat inside me. No. Having one corpse but 2 lives would be a huge sin for me. But, isn't there another possibility? Could it be that I, Natalie Judith, broke the novel's curse, and now I had gained value through my child? The CEO escorted me back to my room, but just as he was about to close the door, I hugged him tightly. The CEO tried to push me away, and raised his hand, but then let it drop. I clung tightly to him, twisting a little as I said, Cleveland Gallup, we're having a baby, Tilda. In reality, children are often the bond of many families. If I played this emotional card to involve Cleveland Gallup more in the child's upbringing, we might. The CEO merely acknowledged with a grunt. I said happily, children are very troublesome. Shall we make little clothes for the baby together? What brand of formula do you think tastes better? Let's go to the hospital for checks together. Do you prefer a boy or a girl? The CEO, a girl. I laughed cheekily. Then let's have a lovely little girl, with my eyes and your nose. She'll be a blend of our heights, probably around 1.68 meters, with people lining up from France to admire her. A little girl is so soft, when held. Girls are always Daddy's little blanket, Tilda. The CEO didn't reply, and I wondered if perhaps I was overdoing it. It's possible. After all, we used to have a contractual relationship. I suddenly behaved this way, and the CEO might suspect I was having a baby to inherit his wealth, although there was some truth to that. Just as I was about to tone it down, the CEO gently wrapped his arms around me, sitting me up. He looked at my belly, deep in thought for a moment, then surprisingly said earnestly, she'll be just like me. Snap back to reality, Natalie Judith. This is Kay Bradley's man. Cleveland Gallup's words left me in a daze. It took me a moment to snap back to reality and I laughed awkwardly. They'll all be like you. What's going on? The CEO didn't seem to be acting. He actually looked quite happy. My heart raced uncontrollably, even more so than the moment I found out I was pregnant. I couldn't dare to look into the CEO's eyes. His gaze was too intense, seeming to reveal all my thoughts at once. Does this mean I gain value through my child? The CEO comforted me briefly and then left. I felt things had progressed significantly, but besides that, I still needed to bond with the CEO, to prevent my daughter from living but her mother being gone. Realizing this, I took advantage of lunchtime to snatch Crystal Scripps' tasks. I delivered lunch to the CEO's room, accompanied by a bottle of wine, personally feeding him. What a temptation! The plan was perfect, ready to execute. As I reached the door, I prepared to bump it open and fall into the CEO's arms. Who knew? As soon as I pressed my ear against the door, a familiar voice came from within. Eden Jewel said, Kay Bradley wants to see you in 3 days after the school anniversary. Cleveland Gallup acknowledged with a grunt. Eden Jewel hesitated. Should I inform Madam about this? My heart raced, eagerly anticipating Cleveland Gallup's response. Yet he remained his usual aloof self. She's pregnant. It's not good to shock her. Let's not tell her for now. Just like that, the warmth in my heart went cold. 3 days later, the novel stated that the CEO would meet Kay Bradley on the campus. which would spark their feelings for each other. I never expected the reality to be even crueler. While I thought the main leads had no interaction yet, they had already been secretly connecting for some time. I had thought the CEO would retain some sentiment for me, but it seems I was just being overly sentimental. I truly felt ridiculous for my own heart's weakness earlier. The first thing I did upon returning to my room was call Omar Ulysses. Hey, you remembered me for once. My voice trembled slightly but was firm. I'm telling you about the project now. Transfer me 10 million right away. Omar Ulysses sounded incredulous. You really have it? I closed my eyes, my heart racing. I'm pregnant. I need to ensure my and my child's safety. I'll email you the project details. Does your 10 million still count? Omar Ulysses realized I was serious, and as soon as I sent the email, 10 million was transferred into my account. Goodbye, plot of the novel. Goodbye, the female lead who was supposed to appear in 3 days. Goodbye, CEO. May you both have 100 years of bliss, while I remain beautiful alone. All right. With my big belly, I listened to Maxwell read the newspaper next door. I say, Natalie Judith, you're about to give birth. How can you be so unconcerned? I bit into an apple, enjoying the sun. My rural courtyard was beautifully and adorably decorated, and I had long prepared the baby's room. I already informed Director Leo. He said he'd drive me to the hospital when the time comes. Maxwell covered his mouth and chuckled. I see you and Max are getting along well. Max even asked my family for eggs the other day, saying he wanted to make you egg custard. Really? I waved my hand dismissively. No, Max is my uncle's son. We're not what you think. What's in today's newspaper? Maxwell cleared his throat and read aloud. The president of Thunder Corporation is buying the Ulysses family's 3 companies. Maxwell looked puzzled. I'm not saying this, but every time the news comes up, it's always related to the Ulysses family and Cleveland Gallup. Is there something going on between them? First, Cleveland Gallup defeats Omar Ulysses and successfully collaborates on some park project. And then Cleveland Gallup keeps acquiring Ulysses family companies. What's the grudge here? I thought about the plot and couldn't come up with a reasonable explanation. Maybe it's just part of the script, like sworn enemies. Maxwell seemed to partially understand. She was already used to my eccentric thoughts and expressions. As for the proposal I had given to Omar Ulysses, it was indeed based on what was in the novel, but I didn't know why it hadn't succeeded. Maybe Cleveland Gallup is just really capable and has a plan B. Regardless, all this felt distant and irrelevant to me now. I wanted to shed my worries, forget the past, and start a new, long life. I grabbed Maxwell's hand, mustering the strength to stand up, ready to go take a nap. Just as Maxwell was about to lower the newspaper, she froze when she noticed a small box on the reverse side. Is this a missing person notice? I shrugged it off. These things sometimes get published in the middle of newspapers. We have them in our world too. No. Maxwell held the newspaper up to my face. This is you, Natalie Judith. The photo of me looked terrible. How rude. They didn't even touch up the picture. After all, I'd left with a child. If Cleveland Gallup knew I was here, I'd be doomed. I began to panic, spinning around a few times and feeling a bit fatigued. If I have to run, I won't be able to. As soon as I finished speaking, a cold voice came from somewhere. Yes. Before I could take a few steps, I was caught. Eden Jewel, the squinty-eyed man, was surprisingly strong. I struggled hard, and Eden, afraid of hurting me, let go. Maxwell regarded the well-dressed man in the car as somewhat familiar but still rushed to my aid, sitting on Eden and urging me to run. I turned to flee but heard my aunt's voice. Natalie Judith, the truth has come to light. I turned to see my aunt standing next to Cleveland Gallup, tears mingling with her smile. She seemed to have aged a lot, gently saying, "It's all a misunderstanding, Natalie Judith. Your sister isn't to blame for what happened with the Gallups. The real culprit has already been captured. He confessed yesterday. The offender is named Kay Bradley, a university student. Your mother went through a lot. Your father was abusive and had an affair, having a daughter with someone else. Your mother was a maid for the Gallups, and Kay Bradley somehow got her number, sowing discord, claiming your father's debts were transferred to her name to avoid burdening your mother. Honestly, I didn't catch everything she said, because it wasn't important. From the start, my aunt and I had different purposes. She sought revenge, but I did not. I was merely a pitiful supporting character holding the script. Aunt, you're confused. Wait. K. Bradley. Are you saying the K. Bradley studying at S University? She's my half-sister. The president, although serious, seemed somewhat aged as he approached me, his stubble showing. I instinctively took a step back, recalling his conversation with Eden Jewel. I didn't know what was happening, but it seemed clear that he had an affair with K. Bradley. Right. Cleveland Gallup suddenly wrapped his arms around me. Natalie Judith. He whispered my name near my ear. Despite his cold tone, I sensed an unusual fondness behind his words. I struggled to push him away. Wait, you didn't. With K. Bradley. He no longer clenched his teeth but sighed instead. I had someone investigate her because she resembled you. No way. Could this really just be a misunderstanding? I looked at Eden Jewel suspiciously. You said you'd meet K. Bradley in 3 days. Eden, seeming frustrated, crawled out from under Maxwell. The president knows you've been trying to uncover the truth and offered to help you investigate. That day, we were going to talk to K. Bradley about the truth from years ago, but we never expected. Wait, this doesn't add up, I questioned. Don't you think K. Bradley is stunning and adorable? Like a little fairy. The president, perhaps worried I'd run away, surprisingly complimented me. I think you are. Whoa. I see it now. I'm really clever, leading the main character to imitate a lesser version of herself. So this means, oh no. Suddenly, a sharp pain hit my abdomen, causing me to collapse to the ground. Ouch, it hurts. Maxwell shouted. She's about to give birth. Quick, to the hospital. Chaos erupted, and everyone was at a loss. Make way. At that moment, Director Jaden pushed through the crowd, trying to pick me up. The president shoved him aside and scooped me into his arms, rushing me to the car. I pinched his arm dramatically for sympathy. Oh, poor me. The president patted my head and leaned down for a kiss. I suddenly felt a cool tear touching my cheek. Who's crying? I looked at the president's seemingly cold eyes, now red and glistening. There was no doubt he was the one shedding tears. I realized again that the president's lack of warmth was an act. In reality, he might be anything but heartless. Looking at it this way, in my script, K. Bradley really is the supporting character. Ha ha ha. This is hilarious. My future now seems secured. CEO, I have one last question. What's the password for that card? CEO, your birthday. The story has concluded. Feel free to subscribe to the channel for the latest updates. New novels are released daily.